The Raiders haven't won a playoff game in over 20 years. They've had 12 head coaches, 5 general managers, and now they've hired the oldest coach in the NFL and just traded for Geno Smith. Every few years, they promise us it's different, that this is the rebuild that finally works. But if you've been paying attention, you and I both know how this is going to end. They had something going in 2021. They built something over 4 seasons with then head coach Jon Gruden, only for it to blow up mid-season. And even then, they still made the playoffs, but instead of building on it, they tore it down again.
What is this? A center for ants?
Now, just a couple years later, here they are hiring Pete Carroll. What the hell has happened? Hired the oldest coach in football, and then went and traded for Geno Smith, who's had 1 good season his entire career. The rest of it's been very mid, let's be honest. And we're supposed to believe that these two are going to fix the problem? Fix the Raiders? Yeah, okay, sure. Look, I'm not making this video because I hate the Raiders. I'm making it because I've watched this team for 2 decades, and it's the same story over and over again. Big names, bold promises, new regime, new hope, and then collapse. Rebuild, repeat. This is why the Raiders are destined to fail. Here's the first problem with the Raiders, and honestly, it's their biggest one. The Raiders have had 12 head coaches since 2003. That's not a football team, okay? That's a revolving door with a logo, a fancy logo. Norv Turner, Lane Kiffin, Art Shell, Tom Cable, Hugh Jackson, Dennis Allen, Jack Della Rio, Jon Gruden, Rich Bisaccia, Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce, Pete Carroll. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wow, you ran through those coaches pretty quickly. And I did, because that's basically how long they were all there for.
Let's get out of here.
Along with all these head coaching changes, they've also had 5 different general managers, which over a 20-year span doesn't seem like a lot. We're going to get more into that later. You can't build a culture when you're hitting reset every 18 months. No continuity means no identity, means no foundation. The Raiders have not won a postseason game in 20 years. 2 decades. If you had had a baby the last time they won a playoff game, your baby can now legally drink as an adult. That's crazy. Think about this for a brief second. Jack Del Rio made the playoffs in 2016. Got fired a year later. Rich Bisaccia rallied a broken-ass locker room in 2021 and got them to the postseason. Gone. Get the out. You know what you're doing? We can't have you here. It's like no one in the front office has learned anything from the past 20 years. No stability equals no success. And that's been the Raiders' story for the last 2 straight decades. I almost feel like it's kind of their motto at this point.
We need stability. That's not going to happen.
Now, to add a little more context to this, we're just going to take a very brief moment to look back on the history of the Raiders. All right, stick with me here real fast. The Raiders' former owner is Al Davis. He passed away in 2011. He owned the Raiders for decades. Not only was he owning the team, he was also the general manager for the team. So he got to make a lot of business decisions. From 1998 to 2001, Jon Gruden was the head coach for then the Oakland Raiders. Made the playoffs, had the infamous tuck game against Tom Brady in the postseason. After that loss, Al Davis fired Jon Gruden, kicked him to the curb. Which was crazy because, he was a good head coach. A year later, the Raiders were actually in the Super Bowl playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were then coached by Jon Gruden. Now, that's a whole different video, different day. Because you could make the argument that Jon Gruden actually had Tony Dungy's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, different video, different day. Just trying to add some context here. Jon Gruden beats the Raiders a year later in the Super Bowl. In 2011, Al Davis passed away, and his son, Mark Davis, was handed the organization. Fast forward to 2018, a lot of time has passed. The Oakland Raiders bring back Jon Gruden as the head coach, under new ownership, Mark Davis, of course. And what did the Raiders go and do? They give Jon Gruden a 10-year, $100 million contract. This is crazy. Instead of just firing a coach every 18 months, they're actually going to hold on to somebody long term. This goes against everything they've been doing.
Yeah, well, things have changed around here.
Oh, we're making great progress.
A face of the franchise, fans actually call him Chucky, which is pretty awesome.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi ho.
Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
Stop with the Chuck.
Great. Great, great, great.
They handed him the keys to everything, and he used them to tear it all down. He said, well, if I'm going to be here for the next decade, we're going to start from scratch and rebuild. He started building of what his version of the Raiders was going to look like. And, you know, when you sign a 10-year, $100 million deal, that's kind of the idea. Again, the Raiders were going against everything they had been doing up to that point. They were used to firing coaches every year, every 2 years. So to give this man 10 years, $100 million, they had a lot of faith, and they knew it was going to take time to get where they needed to get to. Again, bold on their part. Crazy that they did this. This is insane. This is a new era. First 3 seasons wasn't looking very good. The Raiders were 4-12, then 7-9, and then finished 8-8. As you can imagine, they didn't make the postseason any of those years, obviously. But year 4, 2021, was starting out to be a little different. A few weeks into the season, the Raiders were clicking. It seemed like everything had come together. And then we get a mid-season scandal.
Hey, money, Christmas! For crying out loud!
And of course we had a scandal. It's the Raiders. We're not going to have boring football around here. We got to make it a little bit interesting. And boy, was it crazy.
Jon Gruden out as Las Vegas Raiders head coach.
Famed NFL coach Jon Gruden is out.
Jon Gruden resigned from the Raiders last night. A New York Times report showed he used misogynistic and homophobic language to criticize events and people in the NFL while he was a TV analyst.
Gruden resigned from the Las Vegas Raiders last night. It came less than 2 hours after the New York Times revealed a series of Gruden emails with bigoted language. In one of them, Gruden used an anti-gay slur to describe NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell.
That included sexist, racist, and homophobic language aimed at various targets, ranging from players to league officials.
He also is accused of using a racial stereotype to describe the head of the NFL Players Association, DeMaurice Smith.
The NFL slamming Gruden's comments as appalling. Gruden has denied he was racist, and in his statement, the 58-year-old apologized, writing in part, "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt anyone."
Yes, Mr. Chucky. Supposedly has a few opinions about a few different people. The emails drop. They're racist, sexist, homophobic. Gruden's forced to resign. I mean, he didn't get fired. He resigned, but basically, let's just call it like it is. He got fired. You would think those 4 years, nothing. Now we got to start all over again. But you'd be wrong. The Raiders bring in the interim head coach, Rich Bisaccia, who was the assistant head coach. He had worked with Jon Gruden for 20 plus years. He had been there the entire time. Jon Gruden had been there. So he knew what was going down. And they actually rallied, finished 7-5 for that year, and end up making the playoffs. Week 18 of the 2021 season, to get into the playoffs, they actually had to play the Los Angeles Chargers. And that's a crazy game in itself right there. There could be a whole YouTube video just about that game alone. Needless to say, they went into overtime and beat the Chargers and were able to get into the playoffs. Wild card weekend, first round, the Cincinnati Bengals. Keep in mind, 2021 playoffs, Cincinnati Bengals would end up going to the Super Bowl. So we know how this is going to end. The Raiders played very tough. Unfortunately, they did lose 26-19 in that wild card game. There were some crazy plays that went on. We had a blown whistle touchdown. Even more of a tragic way to end the game. Derek Carr throws an interception in the red zone.
Man!
So, again, Rich Bisaccia steps in as the interim head coach. No head coaching experience. Very respected in the locker room. And what does he do? Takes them to the playoffs. Now, you would think a smart organization might think to themselves, hey, Jon Gruden was here for 3.5 years. We've spent all this time and this money. Rich Bisaccia has been here the whole time. Maybe we should just go ahead and keep him as the head coach, keep everybody who we already have in place there. Because again, they've been there all for 3.5 seasons. And let's just run this back. I mean, let's just run it back maybe one more year. But no, that is not what the Raiders do. No, that would make sense. Why would they do that? That's not their MO. Again, we thought we were in that new era, but we know what's really going on. Let's go ahead and press that reset button one more time. Not technically one more time, but let's press it again. No! They hired Josh McDaniels, the so-called offensive genius for the New England Patriots, and paired him with GM Dave Ziegler, both coming from the Patriot system. Now, for those of you who don't know, these two were instrumental in why the Patriots won all those Super Bowl rings for all those years. These two guys. Muy importante. I'm so sorry. Not those two. These two. I'm so sorry.
All right, we get it. Go.
It was marketed as a total reset. A new culture, a new direction, a new Patriots way. They went all in. Traded for Devontae Adams, paid Chandler Jones, gave Derek Carr a fresh extension. The message was clear. We're not rebuilding. We're competing. We're going to win not now, but right now.
So, what do we do now?
Don't worry. Big Mama got this. I got it.
Instead of building on a contender, they built a disaster. The Raiders blew up multiple double-digit leads, lost the Colts team coached by a guy who had never even coached before, and limped in Josh McDaniels' first season with a 6-11 record. It's looking really good. That Patriots way is looking real sexy right now. Year 2, looking even sexier, you could say. After starting 3-5, the Raiders pulled the plug. Josh McDaniels was fired halfway through his second season. Ziegler, the GM, he's out too. Patriots way, get the hell on out. Now, very interesting how Josh McDaniels was fired, because 3-5, definitely not a good record. Not the worst. Allegedly.
Finally, Josh McDaniels actually had Antonio Pierce get up and speak on behalf of him and the coaches. When Antonio Pierce got up there, he said, look, guys, we have to have our own culture. It's got to be about culture here. And we also have to look at it. And he brought up the old Giants team that beat the Patriots, Josh McDaniels' team, in the Super Bowl. When he finishes up that speech, everybody thinks they're great, except for Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels then goes over to him and says, don't ever talk about the Patriots like that. And then you really saw how divided that building got.
Antonio Pierce was on the coaching staff with Josh McDaniels for the Las Vegas Raiders. And while in the locker room, Antonio Pierce was trying to give a motivational speech. Being a former player, he actually won his Super Bowl with the New York Giants when they defeated the undefeated New England Patriots in the Super Bowl all the way back in 2007. Josh McDaniels was part of that New England Patriots staff that lost in the Super Bowl, and he didn't quite like what Antonio Pierce was saying in the locker room to players. Josh McDaniels defended his New England Patriots team that lost in that Super Bowl. This got all the way up to owner Mark Davis. After Mark Davis had spoke with some players about what happened, he made the decision to go ahead and fire Josh McDaniels. Seems only appropriate now to promote Antonio Pierce as the head coach. A former linebacker, and as I mentioned, Super Bowl champ. No head coaching experience, but instant respect from the locker room. You could see that these players were really wanting to play for him. So, after making it official, Antonio Pierce was the head coach again for the 2024 season. Fast forward just over a year, finishing 4-13, Pierce out. Just like that. Another cultural shift and another reset.
Man!
So what's the Raiders' solution to decades of instability and constant rebuilding? They go on ahead and hire the 72-year-old head coach, Pete Carroll.
Wait, who?
Are you serious right now?
Look, I got respect for Pete Carroll. He's a Super Bowl champion, built a dynasty in Seattle, But this man is closer to the Hall of Fame than the beginning of a rebuild. He's not here to build a long-term culture. He's here because the Raiders wanted another big name, another quick fix. And then they really doubled down by trading for Geno Smith.
We are so fucking fucked.
The quarterback who bounced around in the league for years before putting together one decent season in Seattle, and then came crashing back down to earth.
Yeah, they wrote me off. I ain't right back, though. That's the problem. I ain't right back. Let's go.
Let's be honest. Geno Smith is 34 years old. He's inconsistent, and now he's being asked to lead a team that has no identity and literally no time. It feels like Jon Gruden 2.0.
Kind of a dumbass is that?
A familiar name, a flashy move, and a setup destined to collapse.
You're willing to do, right?
The last time the Raiders won a playoff game was January 12th, 2003. Since then, nothing. 2 playoff appearances, 0 wins, 2 decades of heartbreak. In 2016, they went 12-4. Derek Carr was in an MVP race, and then he broke his leg. Season over. In 2021, they made the playoffs through sheer willpower, only to lose on a blown whistle and a red zone pick. Every time they get close, something breaks. Someone leaves, a new vision replaces the old one. And now, here we are. We got a head coach that's 72 years old, a 34-year-old quarterback. We got an organization that thinks it can outsmart its own history. This isn't just bad luck. It's not just a rough patch. The Raiders are stuck in a loop, one that they've created. They don't build, they reset, over and over again. Will they improve? Maybe. But if history has an opinion, and it always does, this will end the same way it always has.
That was diabolical.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I put a lot of time and effort in these videos for people like you. So again, thank you. Please like and subscribe, stick around. I have a lot more content to come.